actually cannot even believe how amazing so many of you have been. The Good Morning Good Life planner has been so successful. It's been amazing to see how many of you have them at home, on your desks, in your morning routines, in your daily life. We actually sold out of it twice and had to restock. Just amazing. Thank you so much for your ongoing support of the planner. Just so you know, if you haven't heard of it yet, it's all at gatlu.store. That's GATLUW.store. Go check it out if you haven't seen it already. This is a limited edition version. It is a 16-monther. It goes all the way through 2021, through the end of your 2020 even. So lots of good stuff in there. And I show you everything that matters to me in a morning routine, like your movement, your mindfulness, your mastery. So you can check those off every day. Plan your goals. We've got the whole thing in there. So definitely go check it out at gatlu.store if you have not already. It is the perfect partner to your morning routine. Check it out.
She's an award-winning YouTuber and best-selling author, obsessed with helping you go after the life you want.
I like it.
Join her as she seeks out the stories and strategies.
Give me every little detail
Of extraordinary people who found success.
I'm going to get emotional. Oh my God.
Welcome to Detail Therapy with Amy Landino.
I think in my young years, if anything, I was much more disorganized. My house was always a mess. I always struggled to just have my life together. So that is where I come from on YouTube. I come from a place of a lot of self-compassion because I know that some of these things don't come naturally. Sometimes you do need to work hard to make these things happen in your life, and treating yourself like a human, not a robot. I think that's my approach on YouTube.
Good morning, good life. Welcome back to Detail Therapy. You just heard a little bit of my chat with Michelle Barnes. In this episode, we're going to get into the details about getting out of a rut and getting back into good habits. Believe me when I say we are all in this together, okay? We're all going through a little bit of a rut, no matter how it's taking shape in our lives. I think we could call 2020 just one big rut. But I have a few tips that could potentially help you. And I'm also sitting down with the one and only Michelle Barnes, better known on YouTube for her amazing work on the MuchelleB channel. She's such an inspiration, and I'm asking her your questions. We're going to talk about how to know you're making good decisions, small ways to refresh your routines, and keys to a productive mindset. If you're new here, hello, my name is Amy Landino, and I will be your host. I'm a success coach and founder of Gatlu House, a resource dedicated to helping you go after the life you want. You can see all of our work, including the show notes for this podcast, by visiting detailtherapy.online. Well, I think we can all relate to not feeling exactly like we're hitting our stride lately. I recently posted a video on YouTube called How I Get Back into Routine. And that's because, and you've heard a little bit about this recently on the podcast, things have been a little off lately, and that's just because life changes, and we did a little bit of travel for the first time really since before the pandemic hit. Getting back into a routine can be difficult when you've certainly had a big shakeup, and that I have, so I can relate. And I posted this video. I was so shocked, and both, I was shocked, but also not shocked at all, I guess. I was shocked because there was so much positivity in just me sharing having a down moment. And I guess we kind of all forget that, right? We want to see the good stuff. We want to hear the good advice. We want to be able to pull ourselves out of it, which is why I'm here for you. Right? But also we need to be able to relate, and me sharing that moment in my life certainly resonated with a lot of people. And I basically just shared some of the things that I do to get back into a routine. So kind of inspired by that, I wanted to talk today about getting out of that rut. And I know if you clicked on this episode, you are feeling it right now. So let's just dive in. First of all, stop thinking that you're the only one. It can really feel that way a lot because we keep ourselves in this little vacuum, in this little sad place, and we think about all the things that are wrong. We forget to think about the things that are going well. And because of that, we also think all of our problems are very special. Oh, no one else has it like me. I have it so bad because of XYZ thing. And in all actuality, first of all, how many of these things that we're upset about are first world problems? And second of all, how much of them are privilege? But third, there are so many people who not only are going through what we are going through on a daily basis in their own experiences and in their own contexts of their life, but also it's probably not as bad as you're blowing it up to be, and you have nobody to talk to about it because you're keeping yourself from growing. That was a lot of the feedback I felt like I was getting on the video, was that there was not only a resounding, this is awesome because now I know I'm not alone, but why was it that moment that they found that out? It was because they had built trust with me in order to navigate it. So who are you trusting with, or who do you have in your life who is positive to you, or in a lot of different ways for you, that you might be able to just sit down and say, hey, what's going on with you? I'd love to hear what you're going through. Because the more you open yourself up to being supportive to others, the more you realize that it is very possible that your problems are not special, and that in fact, many people are going through what you are as well. You can start to get out of your rut when you realize, oh, dang, maybe I should be looking up and looking out so that I can look at what is possible without staying exactly where I am. The next thing I want you to think about is that it's not going to change overnight, okay? Don't expect that you're going to watch my video on how I get out of a routine, or get into a routine, or a better routine rather, and take all the tips and do them all tomorrow and game changer, right? That's just my life. That's just my process. There may be some things in there that work for you, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be bouncing back in a matter of hours. It does take time. That video that I filmed was actually a compilation of clips over what turned out to be about a week. So even as great as I am and as practiced as I am as getting back into a routine and having my routines as my safe space that help me get centered, it doesn't mean that it is so easy for me to bounce back. So it's not going to happen overnight, and you have to allow that to be the case. So remember that starting small is not a bad thing in this case. Find those small things. Find that one thing you can do differently tomorrow morning, or that one thing you can do differently over a period of a day that could help you feel better as you go. And then it's those small steps over time that accumulate. We never want to take that advice to start small, but it is great advice because it works, because it is sustainable. The next thing, of course, you know it's coming. You know it's coming. You think your problems are so special, and partially because you need to put the phone down. Okay? Put the phone down. Just step. Okay, well, keep listening to this podcast, but step away from the phone. Okay? It's time for comparison cancel culture. Okay? We have to stop comparing our lives, the realness of them, the hardness of them, the difficult moments, the fears, the actual anxiety to everyone else's fabulous moments. I think I saw this the other day. Somebody posted something. I don't know. I wish I could give credit. I should have looked at it deeper. But it said, we are the saddest generation with the happiest photos. Think about that. That's so depressing. But also, it's so true. We are constantly thinking about the state at which we are and how good we are and how worthy we are by comparing it to the happiest photos that we are all just creatively coming up with, right? And there are some people out there who are super real, and of course there's the gamut on the internet. There's also just super depressing. But what are we actually looking at? We're looking at hope. And sometimes we teeter-totter on this line of like, well, I'm hopeful, but in all actuality, this content isn't making me feel hopeful. I want it to make me feel hopeful. It's actually making me jealous, or it's actually making me compare myself in unfair capacities. So put the phone down, because if you want to get out of a rut, your addiction to that device and your addiction to the dopamine release of the notifications and the scrolling and all the things that do not indicate who you are is holding you back. Emily Dickinson once said, if you take care of the small things, the big things take care of themselves. This is so big. Write it down on a sticky, put it on your computer at work, put it in your phone as the background, because again, I can't tell you this enough. I don't wake up every day thinking I'm going to take over the world. But when I look at over time, everything I have done, little by little, step by step, question by answer, blog post and video and podcast over time, over what is it now? Almost 11, 12 years. There's a lot that has been done. The big things have taken care of themselves, but only because there's a small step I can take every day. Like right now, I'm just sitting here and I'm talking to a microphone. It actually feels kind of small. And over time, it becomes something so astronomical and so beautiful and inspiring and just motivating for me to know how I am having an impact on you. You know how amazing it is for me when I schedule that time to look at Instagram, because let me tell you, lately, I've just only been wanting to get on there very sparingly. When I do, and I see in my tags how many of you are screenshotting this podcast and sharing it, that means the world to me. That's that big thing that's taking care of itself just by me sitting down and pushing through and making time and trying to do the best that I can. It is not as grand as it looks, but the benefit over time, it really is so grand. So thank you for that, but also just a little comparison for you. But finally, let me say that if you truly want to get out of a rut, you've got to look at the people around you. I hope I'm one of those people around you. I hope you've been listening to the podcast every week and that we hang out, and maybe you check out YouTube and maybe you read the book. I hope that we hang out often and that it is an empowering relationship, because the more you do that with the right people, the people who actually get you to do something small, take that step, try to combat your fear, those are the people that are going to take you further. Surrounding yourself with empowering people, vital to getting out of your rut. If you want to stay right where you are, then stay right where you are with the people you're hanging out with right now. Nothing against those people, but you're going to have to jazz it up a little bit if you want some positive influences to take you to that next step in your journey. Hopefully, out of the rut. It's going to be uphill, but it's forward. On that last note, that is why I wanted to bring somebody really empowering and amazing to you today. I would like to introduce you to our guest. Michelle Barnes is an Australian YouTuber known for her wonderful work as MuchelleB. On her channel, she shares what it truly means to create an intentional life. Her content inspires thousands around the world to take control of their time, reach their goals, and live happier, more productive lives. Let's get into it with MuchelleB. Michelle Barnes, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Why do you do what you do, Michelle?
It's a really good question, and I think that there are a few answers. One of the main reasons that I do what I do is because I am really fascinated by behavior change. I'm really interested in the idea that people can change their identities over time through action and small little changes in their life. And also, I really love creating content, to be totally honest. I love creating content. I love distilling ideas into really easy to digest videos or checklists and just little actionable ways of making changes. So I think those are the main reasons that I do what I do. A little bit selfish, but it is what it is.
You know what? I think a little bit has to be selfish. I've
Absolutely.
always said that. I'm like,
Yeah.
you do it for a specific audience, but like if you get up every day and you go after it, it really has to have a little bit of you in it. And I really do get that impression from watching your channel. For anyone who's not familiar with your YouTube channel, you guys have to check it out. If you enjoy anything that I do, you will absolutely love what Michelle does on the MuchelleB channel. And I really do get that impression. I think you're so good at illustrating the point. And I can tell that that really comes from a genuine place of loving being a content creator.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, I absolutely agree. I do think there needs to be some selfishness in it. And I mean, I really respect anyone that comes out and they're just like, I do this because it helps people. I'm like, yes, you do you. But I don't know that that is my full motivation. There's definitely, I'm in it for me and for my audience and my community as well.
Yeah, totally. Okay, first, before we get into that, I was laughing with you before we hit record because there was a time, Schmitastic is like a current and former moniker in my life because it's from my maiden name. And for the longest time, people really thought my name was Amy Schmitastic, and it
Oh, that's
wasn't.
amazing.
And I
I
imagine
love
that
that.
you, I imagine you've run into this because I go, oh my gosh, I'm literally interviewing MuchelleB and I had to ask her what her last name was before we started this recording. Do you get that where people think it's spelled with an M-U, MuchelleB, and like,
So
have you had that?
often, like unbelievably often. And people will be like, because I'll, mention what my name is with the I, and they'll be like, oh, your name's Michelle. Half of my emails are addressed to, hi, Michelle. I'm like, oh, bless. But I don't blame anyone. I mean, that's what my YouTube name is. I completely understand how you'd come to that conclusion. But yes, it's Michelle, not Michelle or Michelle or however you want to say it.
I love it. It's so fun because it's just this reminder that we've done such an amazing job of
Yes,
branding.
branding
And
so
at
good.
the end of the day, it's like props to you. And also our audience is so smart. They're like, whatever, I'll call you whatever you want me to call you. That's just I get it.
Yes.
But yeah, so I'm really curious. Honestly, we've just sort of existed in a really similar circle on YouTube and we see each other and we love each other's stuff and it's like, hey, props to you, cool. And I sent you a DM and I was like, how have we not talked? Let's get on the podcast. But I feel like I don't know anything about your beginning. So I would really love to hear, how did you get excited about behavior change and habit building and content creation and marrying all of that together? Where does this story start for you?
Oh, it's such a non-linear story, to be totally honest. So when it comes to content creation, the way that I kicked off on YouTube, I actually created a few little thrift hauls. I think they got a total of 10 views. And then I actually, my first video that did quite well on YouTube was a video on nipple piercings. I don't know, is this a PG podcast? Is that
Oh,
something I can
don't worry
mention?
about it. It is what it is. That's so
Okay.
interesting.
Yeah, so that was one of my first bigger videos on YouTube, and I remember being so excited. And it was very much an informational video. So it was like, here's the facts about nipple piercings, here's what's up, here's what you need to consider. So similar to what I do today, just about a very, very different topic. And it did really, really well. And from there, I just kept on creating content. I was creating content about mainly fashion and beauty because that was all I watched at the time. Then I slowly started to dive into the things that I was more interested in. So behavior change, habits, whatnot. It got a really good reception. So I kept on going from there. As to where I really got interested in behavior change, it's a little cliche, a little stereotypical, but I read The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. Have you read that book?
Oh God, it's such a good book.
Such a classic. It's a classic. So I read that book, and that was when I went through a full-on decluttering process, and I documented the whole thing on my channel. And then that's when I started to really focus on behavior change videos because that's when in my life it was probably becoming more prominent for me.
Yeah, and you know what's funny about that? As nonlinear as it is, I feel like we all have super nonlinear stories and we always feel like we need to like kind of explain that. But it makes so much sense that especially if you have that creativity bone in your body, that you not only go through a moment like that in your life, even if it's just something really simple, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to declutter and I'm going to notice the differences in myself, the differences in my organization, the differences in my approach, my attitude, and not want to share that. I feel like we have that in common where if I've learned something, I am chomping at the bit to start
Oh,
communicating that to the world.
Absolutely. And for me, it can get a little bit because I get so interested in so many different things and I'm like, I want to share it all. A lot of them are related to, behavior change and whatnot, but sometimes I'm just chucking out things that are completely unrelated. But I definitely love sharing things, sharing information. When I find things out, I'm like, okay, I need to share this. I need to try this and share my experiences.
Definitely, definitely. So what does your life look like as it pertains to Hannah asked this actually from my Shine Squad on Patreon. She said, like, what
Yeah.
actually happened to have you get started on YouTube? Was there a previous career? So like how has this all gone for you to this point? Are you full-time YouTubing? Like, what does your life look like when you think about all the productivity, all the organization that you're doing? What are all of the things in your life to make that happen?
Oh, that's such a broad question. What are all of the productivity things in my life to make that happen?
I guess like how many things are you balancing? Because I guess like my ulterior motive here is
Yes, tell
sometimes
me.
I feel like when you're in the world of productivity,
Yes.
you are often assessed by the audience in terms of what is actually happening in your life so that I can relate to that, because then I will be able to say, you know what, maybe your tactics will work for me because we have a few things in common. And there are other times where it's like, oh, I like what you're saying, Amy, but like I don't have a life like yours, so I don't think those tips will work for me. So I guess I'm trying to think like,
Okay. Yeah.
what does your real world look like? And then that way we kind of get an idea of where we're starting from to follow your productivity sort of thought processes.
Yes. So with my online presence, I think that a lot of the time people go onto my channel and they think that I am a very naturally hyper organized person, hyper put together. I've always been a person that sets and achieves my goals. And it is tough, obviously, when you're a later in your productivity journey and your self development journey, you're showing up online. That is what people would assume. However, I definitely didn't come from that place. I think in my younger years, if anything, I was much more disorganized. My house was always a mess. I always struggled to just like have my life together. So that is where I come from on YouTube. I come from a place of a lot of self-compassion because I know that some of these things don't come naturally. Sometimes you do need to work hard to make these things happen in your life. And treating yourself like a human, not a robot. I think that's my approach on YouTube. Does that answer your question?
Totally. It does. It absolutely does. Because it really is so personal. I feel like this
Yeah.
journey of productivity, because it's such a broad word in and of itself. And it's really exciting when you find those resources. But
Yeah.
again, like even myself, I'm open to trying new things. I'm open to looking into whether it's like digital note taking versus analog or whatever the case. But I know I'm going to go into it thinking my situation is so different. And we're all really good about that, qualifying things and saying, my situation is so different. So, what is this person going to bring to the table that I think could potentially switch a gear in my mind that's actually going to make this work for me? But that is how it's so personal for that reason. I love that you talk about that in terms of like self compassion and that self awareness of that is so big. Have you
Yeah.
found yourself at any, I mean, you talked about that, right? Like where you felt a little bit disorganized at one point and things changed. Do you ever notice, and I assume the answer is yes, that you find yourself in a productivity rut even today, even as a person in this field? And when you are in that rut, how do you try to find your way out of it, get back to your stride?
Sure. Yeah, of course I do. I feel like we're all, normal human beings. We all find ourselves in productivity ruts on occasion. I think it really depends on the type of productivity rut. I feel like you could categorize them into a few different ways. I think for me, I'm sure that you experience a similar thing in that you'll have a day or a few days where you'll just feel really sluggish. So if I have a few days where I'm feeling really sluggish, I actually have I have a bounce back checklist. It's something that I've talked about a few times on my channel. And usually that is just going through the basic self-care steps. So it'll be really basic things like making sure that I've got my nutrition sorted, I have a shower, I clean my house, those kind of little steps. So that's sort of more of a mini productivity rut. So you're in just like a bit of a day feeling blah. If I'm in like a real productivity rut, like I have projects that I want to be working on, but I'm not doing the work, I'm just feeling demotivated. I think for me, my go-to is to revisit my vision for those goals and really re-tap into my why, and remind remind myself of the reason that I started in the first place, to remotivate myself and get that spark going again.
I love that you talk about that. One of the biggest things that we talk about is, why do you do what you do, right? What is your why?
Yeah.
And I often get a lot of feedback on that. I haven't really figured out my why, Amy. Like, what is that? When you think about how you can bring yourself back to center and say, why you're doing what you're doing, how honest are you being with yourself? Do you feel like your why, and you could say it or not say it, I feel like it ends up being really personal to us, but I always tell people, like, this is not your Instagram bio line, okay? This is truly for you, and it doesn't have to be this press release that you put out there. How honest do you feel like you are with yourself when you have to get to that bounce back? I love that idea.
Um, I mean, I think that I'm pretty honest with myself, to be fair. It depends, because sometimes I think that I have struggled with setting my why, because like we were talking about before, you want this really fluffy why of like, I just want to save the world, help people, rah, rah, rah. But sometimes it can be a more selfish why. And I think that that's okay. Tell me your thoughts on that. I'd love to hear them.
100%.
Yeah. It's okay to have a bit of a selfish why. But for me, I mean, for my recent project that I launched, Life Map Collective, which is sort of my planner range we were talking about earlier, for that, I definitely had a period where I was in a slump and I was just like, oh, I have absolutely no motivation to continue doing this. But for me, it really was revisiting that why of like, okay, there's this community of people around the world, they're connecting, they are working on their life map goals, they're doing this, that, and the other. And that was, for me, what motivated me. So I do think that I am quite honest in my whys. And I definitely think that I'm at a place where I'm self-aware enough to pick up on when I'm not being honest with my why.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
By the way, it is so relatable to get frustrated. I don't know how you feel about this. I mean, we're really just venturing into the world of like IRL products, other than a couple of books that I've written. And I know that you're doing that with the Life Map. You also have a digital version of the Life Map. I'm so excited about it. I actually have the digital version. I haven't been able to get my hands on the hard copy yet, but I can totally relate to this whole like, oh, this is getting frustrating. This process is so big. Like the mistakes, they're so high. Like the stakes are high. And it's like, oh, can I just go back to making YouTube videos? But it is amazing when you think about the why of that. And it's like, these people really are helped by this. How can you give them something more tangible to move forward with? But then again, being honest with yourself. And I almost think of it as, what's the alternative? If I'm not going to be honest with myself about like why I'm doing this, what's the alternative? What if I couldn't do this anymore? What if nobody was listening? What if nobody wanted my advice? What if I had to go back to my old life that I left a long time ago? And I think that can often be a great motivator. I mean, I don't like to be negative, but I do like to put in perspective how fortunate that I am as much as I possibly can, because that will remind you like, honey, you need to get out of bed and go. Let's go.
So true. Yeah, no, absolutely. I also revisit on talking on the sort of the negative side of things. Something that I do that I've talked on my channel about is creating an anti-vision for my goals. I talk about the idea of creating this vision of what all the things are that could go wrong. And I find that flipping that around and then deciding, okay, what can we do to mitigate all of those things can be really helpful as a motivator for me. It sounds bizarre, but it's definitely worked for me in the past. That's another tactic.
I love that. I love that. I love that because you're giving worrying a platform and compartmentalizing it. So it doesn't have to be this thing that continues to exist in your mind. Again, like we talk about morning pages here a lot. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with morning pages, like the journaling technique?
Yep.
It's like, get it out of your mind and give it a place. And that way you can move forward from it. So morning pages doesn't have to be pretty. Your anti-vision, of course, is not going to be pretty, but give it a place so it can exist. And then you can move on from it and say, what are we going to do to move out of that direction? I love that idea.
Yes. And it works really well, not just for projects. I've found it works really well for life in general. Creating a little anti-vision for your life, I find incredibly motivating. If you just draw up a little story of what your life might look like in 3 years' time, based on what you're doing in your life now, maybe behaviors that you're not acting on or behaviors that you are embracing that you're perhaps not incredibly happy with. If you draw up a little anti-vision for yourself, you'll find yourself wildly motivated to make changes, or at least that's what I've found and what what a lot of my community have found, because it's quite emotional to think about, okay, if I don't take action on that thing that's bothering me in my life, what will my life look like in 3 years' time because of that? And yeah, generally ends with you making a whole bunch of changes in your life. So that's another activity that I found super helpful.
I like that. And just to kind of put a pin in this specifically, I think this is a really one potential great way of, if you're having a hard time uh, sitting down and saying, what is my vision, or like vision boards in general, people might struggle with, or just simply writing down your
What they
goals,
want.
but writing them
Yeah.
down in present tense. Sometimes people struggle with that, right? Because there's a lot of imposter syndrome that can go with that. But
Yeah.
if you're struggling with that, thinking about the anti-vision, sometimes just looking at things from different perspectives, I think could really move somebody very powerfully in the right direction.
Definitely.
Love
Yeah,
that
and if
idea.
you're struggling with what you want as well, it gives you a bit more clarity on what you want by deciding what you don't want, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
absolutely. Absolutely. At least narrow some things down. Okay. I have to get into this because this has been such a struggle in my life. We're going to talk about some serious productivity first world problems right now. Everybody get ready.
Okay,
So,
amazing.
um, I have had this ongoing love-hate relationship with Evernote, and I've talked about it very publicly. Like, I get it because it works for me, but it also doesn't work for me at all because sometimes it's glitchy, blah, blah, blah. It's ugly. It doesn't make me excited. And I finally said to myself, okay, I have a feeling Notion is the right move, but
Notion is the
I
right move.
need to, yeah, I need to talk to the right people about this. So I went into the MuchelleB world and I looked into a couple of your Notion tutorials. And I have to say, I'm feeling a lot better about it. Here was my hesitation. The nice thing about an Evernote, I feel like, is it's very low barrier to entry. Sometimes Notion looks so good, it feels overwhelming. And Amelia actually said this too in Shine Squad. She said, how are you integrating Notion and some of the other things that you're working on, such as Life Map? And what is your best tip to move past that overwhelm, especially starting a big project or setting up Notion for the first time? I definitely felt that overwhelm with Notion. I thought some of your templates were amazingly helpful. But did you feel that way? I don't know. I guess for the people who are trying to figure out digital note taking, sell us on Notion and get us over the hump of getting started.
Okay, well, Notion is my baby. I love it so much. I think it's the best productivity app that is out there. For me, I think the benefits of Notion is that you can have everything in the one place. Firstly, that was a huge thing for me. So pre-Notion, I had stuff in my Google Drive. I had Excel spreadsheets lying around. I had lists on lists on lists. I just had my content calendar was in my Google Calendar. I think I had Ulysses for writing my video plans.
Uh-huh.
And
I've
now
used Ulysses too.
yeah, and it is a great tool, but it is when it's separate to everything, like your content calendar and everything, it can get very overwhelming and confusing. Also, you'll find that you won't be revisiting those systems very much. Like I know that I had Google Drive docs that I hadn't revisited in like a year that were book notes and whatnot, just because they didn't feel easily accessible. And I think that that's the wonderful thing about Notion is it does all of the things and you can put all of the stuff in one place. So it has Asana boards, it has calendars, it has galleries, it has places where you can write your video plans. Like it just has all of the stuff under one roof. And that's why I love Notion so much. It is also quite customizable. So you were saying that you like pretty things, like you like making things look good, which 100% relate. Notion, you can customize it and chuck your own stuff on there, pictures, whatnot. There are emojis, there are all of the things. And that's what I love so much about Notion. In terms of getting started, it can be overwhelming. So there is just so much functionality that you might just go, oh God, I don't know if I can do this. I know I spent like a good 2 days just setting up my Notion. But
Yeah.
I would say to kick off, start really small. I think that is such a hard thing to advise people that are interested in productivity because you download a productivity system, you're like, I want to do every single thing. I will track my
Exactly.
entire life in here. Like, you get so excited that you implement all of the things. So I would just say start as simply as you can with the absolute bare necessities, if you possibly can, and then build up from there. That way you don't get too overwhelmed with setting up your entire life. Like I still have things that I'm trying to slowly integrate into my Notion, but start small would be my main advice.
Yeah, and I think that's really it's a good tip, honestly, because these things can get really robust and work really well and fire at all cylinders. But if never there is a moment where it actually feels natural to you, it's just not going to get to that point. It's just going to look pretty and you're not going to know how to use it. So I definitely
Yes.
agree. I think some templates that you recommended, and there's definitely some other people out there that are creating templates, just look for things that you might need if you want to do that. But I agree with you, Michelle. I think it's just like, see if you even like how a checklist works, or just do a to-do list. Just have your top 3 priorities for the day living on the homepage, and just
Yeah.
make that work for you, because it does get fun as you dive in, but if it doesn't become natural, I think it's just overwhelming and annoying, and just like every other tool.
Yeah, and it becomes something that you don't use. And I think that is exactly what you don't want. You want this to be a trusted
Right.
space where you put all of the stuff that you use. On the other hand, if you do just want to take things out of other people's templates, chuck them in, you can take that approach as well. I would just be conscious of revisiting your Notion system and actually asking yourself, am I using all of these things? Do I need these
Yeah.
things after a week or two? That way you don't just have this big useless dashboard of stuff that you never touch, making your system kind of useless.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree with that. Okay. Well, I want to ask a couple details about your life. You are a morning person. You are talking to me first thing in the morning over in Australia. And
Yes.
I'm curious of what your morning routine is like. Is it really routine, or does it just have a couple of the same things? What does it look like for you?
Okay, so I thought that you would ask this question, and I was actually thinking back. I was like, you are the morning routine queen. So I was thinking back to a video, and I actually think that it was one of your videos. Correct me if I'm wrong. You may not even remember, but you said your morning routine starts the night before.
Yes,
Does that sound like a you thing to say?
sure does.
Yes. So the night before is definitely, I think, where most of my routine is. So the night before, every night I will go through, I'll do a little 15-minute tidy. It's one of my favorite habits that I've integrated into my life. I'll also do my daily plan for the next day. And I like to lie out my exercise clothes for the morning. And then when I get up in the morning, lately it's been a little different day to day because our climbing gym, so I go bouldering. Our climbing gym has recently opened in the morning, just 2 days a week. So we've been going bouldering
Oh.
a few days in the morning. And then otherwise I might work out. I usually tuck on an audiobook in the morning as well, have an audiobook going so that I'm filling my mind with all of the good things and avoiding social media first thing. And that's kind of a gist of
Mhm.
my morning routine.
Um, I love so many things about that. First of all, like, I just love the whole concept of lay your exercise clothes out. I've heard the tip before, wear your exercise clothes to bed. Like, no, I don't wear exercise clothes to bed.
That's a
I
lot.
get
It sounds
dressed to
very
go to.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to be compressed for 8 hours. No, but definitely, I love that tip. What the bouldering? That sounds really fun. Like, it makes you want to look forward to a workout.
Yeah, definitely. And I go with my brother-in-law. It's just a good time. It's a really good sport, lots of
Oh.
problem solving, and you feel like you're achieving things because when you get climbs, it's such a good feeling. So it's very motivating. It's a great sport.
Yeah. Do you I have to ask you an audiobook that you've listened to recently that you have loved on the other days that you're going to do different workout things, or what are you listening to now? Is there one, maybe not right now, but you have listened to recently that you recommend?
Oh, I have so many audiobooks and books that I would recommend. Right now, I've just started listening to The Courage to Be Disliked. I don't know if you've read that one. It's really
No.
interesting so far. I mean, a lot of what they're talking about at the moment is how your experiences don't create your reality. It's the meaning that you give to your experiences create your reality. I've
Mm.
literally just started it. So that's really interesting. What other audiobooks did I recommend? Let me hop into my Audible and I'll have a look at my
Or
previous.
just books in general. We love a good reco.
Sure, sure. A book that has really impacted me more recently is, well, not really recently, but it's always on my mind, I suppose,
Mhm.
is How to Be Yourself. And I think that's by Ellen Hendrickson. Maybe incorrect. I can send you
That
the
is a
actual name.
sexy title. That is a good
It
title.
it's such a great book. So I am someone who has struggled with managing touches of social anxiety here and there, and this book
Mm.
is quite focused around social anxiety and how to manage that in your life life and how taking action can actually be the way to solving social anxiety. So I found that a really, really inspiring book. It's probably one of the reasons that I even started bouldering, because bouldering to me is quite a triggering situation. Putting myself out there, people can watch me suck at bouldering. It's still something that I'm working through. But that book has inspired me to take a lot of action that I otherwise might not have taken. So that is a great book.
Okay, I just feel like I need to unpack this really quick because
Sure, yeah.
even me saying the words like bouldering, that sounds so fun. Like, I definitely do not sound personally super excited about it because of social anxiety. So,
Oh,
but it's still like
really?
the concept, right? Like the concept of, oh, that would be cool because at least your workout would be more interesting. Can you
Sure.
just talk like, just not like it doesn't have to be your whole life story. However,
Yes.
I would
Yeah.
love to hear like where if you could make a connection between the social anxieties that you have dealt with and like just where do you feel like they originate from? Do you think it's as simple as I would call myself an introvert, so I would connect it directly to that? Or do you think it was more than that? And how has that journey been for you just to kind of figure your way out?
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely an introvert, but I think it does go beyond that. For me, it's such an interesting one. My social anxiety is quite specific. It is usually related to performance, which sounds really funny. It's like when I'm doing
Yeah.
something and someone is watching me. So public speaking, actually being on a podcast is quite anxiety inducing for me. It's not really something that I talk about a lot because I don't want it to be a huge part of my identity.
Sure.
But it's something that, I've been to see therapists about it. They've actually told me that I have more generalized anxiety a long time ago. I
Mhm.
choose to not believe that. Yeah, and that sounds really ridiculous. I don't like to give myself really strong labels, and I chose not to accept that I had general anxiety. It's not something that I relate to. It usually is quite hyper specific. To give you an example, it might be like, a very vivid memory of social anxiety. A moment when I was like, hey, I think something's up here is when I was at a gathering. It was sort of the morning after said gathering. This is when I was quite young. And I was asked to make the eggs at this house, and I was like freaking out because I felt like, oh God, I'm going to make these eggs wrong. Like I was absolutely paralyzed. I just felt like I could melt on the spot. And that was when I was like, hey, I think that there is a little bit of overactivity going on in your brain when it comes to doing things in front of other people. And I think that is where my social anxiety comes from. So in general, like I can chat to people one-on-one, and I really actually love people, but it's more specific scenarios where I'm doing something where someone could be watching. Is this getting a bit personal? I don't know if I'm oversharing,
No,
but
I love this. You have no idea. I'm trying not to interrupt you because I feel so many feels right now. And first
yeah.
of all, thank you. I just want to acknowledge you for just opening up about that. Also completely understand any decision that you make for yourself that is not something that you want to make a part of your identity. And this is a lot of mindset stuff that you have to work through really personally. But I feel like you just really connected a dot for me even. It
Really?
sounds so funny because when people look at what we do, right? And they're
Yeah.
like, how are you introverted? You make YouTube videos. And it's like, well, it's interesting because there's an amount of control that we have in that
Oh,
medium.
absolutely. Yeah.
And to your point, I never played sports because it's like, there's people watching and like people mess up sports a
Yes.
lot. If you miss a
Yeah.
shot, you're in trouble. Like, and I
Yes.
think that there really is a connection there. I got into public speaking, but it wasn't until I became very interested in the subject matter, so interested that that confidence just sort of grew. But that wasn't something I was excited about at the start. Public speaking was not something I was excited about doing because on the surface, it's much more connected to something I would have anxiety about, doing something that could potentially go wrong in the moment. So, wow, like that was deep for me just now.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Yeah. And I think that definitely there is a sense of control on YouTube. People are like, what do you mean you're a shy person? You literally make
Mhm.
videos for thousands and thousands of people. I'm like, it's not the same.
Right.
But I also do think that with my social anxiety, it's gotten a lot better over the years. And a lot of that has been due to just taking small actions. So I used to be very anxious about even like putting petrol in my car and just forcing myself to do that over
Oh
and over
my
again
gosh,
with the idea of
Michelle,
people
we're the
watching
same
me.
person.
Are we really? I love that. I love that. makes me feel a little bit more valid, because it always feels so silly to say those kind of things. Like, oh, putting petrol in my car, the idea of someone thinking that I could be doing that wrong, it sounds so ridiculous. And even as I say it, I know that is a ridiculous fear, but it's still something that I've absolutely felt. So yeah, but forcing myself to do those little things over and over again. I've recently been going to Toastmasters, just putting myself in those situations to sort of desensitize myself to that anxiety is probably the best way that I've found to move through it. Even, yeah, going bouldering, although I have started going in the morning, which is when less people are there, just because I was
There
like,
you go.
you know,
There's always a little.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just love that. Thank you for sharing that. I just think that there's probably a lot of people who we just like you said, we're not just going to put a label on ourselves. We're not just going to accept these labels. And even though I call myself an introvert a lot, I feel like I'm usually doing it to coach other people and say it's okay. It's more about the self-awareness. But hopefully somebody heard something here today that made them realize, like, oh, that's right. We can directly connect it to something. We can work toward bettering something. And maybe me and Michelle, we are really productive and checking off the lists and learning these different hacks and things, because again, it's something that helps us do something really small as a part of our day to make us feel like we've got a little bit of control, so that when we have those wavering moments that we know are probably going to happen and are just trying to prepare ourselves, we feel like we've got at least a few other bases covered in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do hope that it reaches someone and they feel a little more validated.
Yeah, that was great. Okay, well, I wish I could talk to you all day, because clearly we're the same person, like I said.
I love that.
I really have to tell people they have to go check out the life map. I want you to know, even though I haven't touched it yet, it is stunning. I don't even, is it a planner or is it a workbook? I feel like it's so much in one book. I mean, can you kind of explain what that is and where people can find out more details about it?
Sure, yeah. The life map is basically a 13-week goal setting system. So you go through the process of doing your dreaming, you create a plan for your goals, and then you work through those goals for a period of 13 weeks. It's filled with a lot of self-compassion. It encourages a lot of experimentation in your behavior change. And it's also backed up by a really nice community of amazing human beings. And they're all meeting up and meeting accountability partners. It's so lovely. And they can find that at lifemapcollective.com.
I love that. And I also said to Michelle, because she's like, oh, I heard you have a planner too. You know what? Yes, I do. And guess what? You can get the life map and you can plan the next 13 weeks and your goals. And then you can get the Good Morning, Good Life planner. And that's your morning routine, bestie. And you use them both together. And there's a place for you to expand on them. I honestly just think if you love planners, they're both great. And that's like the fun thing about what we do is this is what we're good at. We pick like the thing that we want you to know, and we're trying to give it to you in that tangible form. And so I hope you will go and check that out. I know I've had so much support about the Good Morning, Good Life planner, but like the life map is also where it's at. And I want everybody to know that. So definitely go check that out. Michelle, I have to ask you my last question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
What does it mean to you to go after the life you want?
This is the question that I should have given more thought to when I went on this podcast. I think that to go after the life that you want, it means creating a definition of success that is tailored to yourself and not a product of what society has told you that you should be working towards or working on. And then in a very Michelle way, creating a system to move towards that life and keep on embracing those changes and moving forward.
MuchelleB, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been so much fun.
Thank you so much to Michelle Barnes for joining us today. Make sure you check out in the show notes how you can follow along with her journey. Grab yourself a copy of the life map. It's all there at detailtherapy.online. And thank you to those of you who have left a 5-star review for this podcast. It truly supports our work. Today's shout out goes to Ashley12886. Thank you so much, Ashley, for taking the time. I acknowledge you for that. And make sure you send us a little email, hello@amylandino.com, because you just won a copy of the Good Morning, Good Life planner. If you have not already left your 5-star review and shared it on iTunes, then you could be next. Make sure you do it, and I will be looking for our next winner over these next couple of weeks. That's all for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it as always. Remember, subscribe for good vibes, kiss the ones you love, and go after the life you want. I'll see you back here on Tuesday. Cheers.